I wanted to use today to be honest, like it just came up kind of like casually. Duena and I were catching up on Friday, and it was after how long? It was months,
Yeah.
like many months since last fall, I think. I can't remember, but anyways, like it was. I know it was after the first wave. Yeah, and you actually got corona in between the times that we were speaking. We didn't actually talk about that, but it was great to catch up with you, and I'm really excited about what you're doing with PeopleNotTech and how the software has evolved to become a universal tool uh, for people in any company. I got really excited when you showed me the new features that maybe we can use it even in our startup. That it's kind of like it's like Slack, you know. If you have the ability to communicate, then why not have this to have the ability to monitor, not monitor, but interact with how your team is doing. So, so Duena, so I've got questions for you. So what would you say about how the pandemic influenced your perspective on psychological safety? And I mean, I was reading this morning what you posted, and so maybe people could get their answers there, but I'd like to hear it from you directly, how you feel about psychological safety and pre, middle, and post pandemic.
Pre, middle, and post pandemic. That's a really interesting framing. I try. I think obviously a lot has changed for all of us. For some people, there was more of a dramatic change than for others. Obviously, if people were already working in a remote fashion, in distributed teams, in autonomous teams, in an agile fashion, in some digitally native company, then obviously the pandemic hasn't made a huge difference to them. But even then, even in that perfect scenario, we all had to contend with the fact that we are in this mass uncertainty times, and it's not been easy for anyone, no matter where you are from. With that said, on the other extreme, you have people who had been in an office until the day that they were told they cannot come back, and they had never ever used the computer at home for working together. Some of them didn't even know for a fact who all was in their team. Forget did they have enough psychological safety with them. So the two extremes have loads and loads of variations in between, and the vast majority of us fall somewhere in the middle, where we had sometimes work from home, but it was more of a treat than not the usual,
Yeah.
and which paradoxically may have contributed to how people felt some type of way about being at home working. And so we were somewhere in the middle with some practice of being in the office, some practice of working remotely. But I think it's simplistic to say that it is only because we started working remotely that this was a big challenge. I think we have to remember we were and are to a degree in some places in a life or death situation. It's impossible to remove that from our day to day. On top of everything, our workload at home, our elderly, our children, it all kind of fell on our shoulders. So there was the separation between work and life has all but disappeared. And what we're seeing today as effects, I think, we haven't yet, unfortunately, seen the full effect of it. I think we're just scratching the surface. I think we are trying to not panic because there's reasons to panic outside of just we hear and read a lot about the burnout and the how difficult it's been and how everyone worked 30-40% more than they should have done, and all that is very true. But I think we are oblivious still to the longer term effects. And what I say sometimes to our clients is, um, you know how sometimes you're in crunch time and you're doing something really complicated, and so you're focusing on that.
And very important for a short period of time. Yeah.
Exactly. And so, for instance, you prepare for, you have a deadline, or you prepare for an exam, or you have something, that big that's coming up. And have you ever seen how people will finish that exam or get to that deadline, and then they'll all of a sudden breathe in, but then fall ill with like a cold, or get a sudden headache they never even noticed? That's because when you're in flow, you lose a sense of self. And that's kind of, I believe, what's going to have happened to us, because once the pandemic ends and we can breathe in, and that in no ways means that we're going to be coming back to whatever was normal before, but it does mean that we'll feel there will be some declaration of success over COVID at one point or another, no less because we need it economically. And I feel like that's when we're going to see the full effects on the mental well-being of individuals, and as connected to that, the well-being of teams, and their ability to kind of recongeal around the idea of psychological safety. With all that said, I think we have made some serious strides in terms of the conversation on people. I think many teams found their natural way towards psychological safety, unencumbered by visual command and control from across the room.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, what's your experience with the virtual, that just being forced to be virtual has kind of brought this topic of psychological safety and out to the forefront without people even realizing it?
Precisely. I think a lot has been gained, but I also think that none of this is permanent without there being some type of organizational permission that's being given from here on, some type of reformulation of the discourse around work. It's worrying to me that a lot of places are talking about going back to the office. It's worrying to me that a lot of places are focused on where work happens. And
Why do you think? Why do you think that is? Is it just because they're this change? Like, I'm just thinking out loud. Is it because this change is too much for them to kind of lose control per se, or is it that they want to give people some sense of normalcy that was before that maybe they didn't need? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
I think there are various reasons why we see this happening. I think it's naive of any company to believe that they can sustainably do that long term once the possibility of flexible working is out of the genie is out of the bottle. They're not going to be able to bottle it back up again. With that said, we have a lot of what I call human debt, which is essentially the equivalent of technical debt but for people, meaning all the things we haven't done for our humans at work in the last 40 years of working in the knowledge economy.
Right.
And in that human debt, you're left with a lot of structure and people that are clinging on tight to their idea of what the workplace should look like. And they won't go down without the fight, yes. But again, I think bringing anyone mandatorily back in the office is a mistake, as is discussing things in terms of where you keep people and not what they do.
Sorry, I don't know if you can hear the noise. There's a helicopter flying over. That happens sometimes, but very rarely. It's a medical helicopter that lands and reloads fuel. Sorry about that.
No, we haven't heard it, but should they be worried? Is that the police?
No, it's just because it's quite noisy, quite loud. So a little bit more about human debt. If I understand correctly, you're someone to say are you trademarking this, or what's?
Yes, it is trademarked. It's a bit. I'm not one for trademarks usually. I have one on emotional banking, but
and PeopleNotTech and PeopleNotTech.
But I made a big point in an article about how people shouldn't trademark their own terminology, and we should all use English. And I still stand by that. We should all use English, but
I think. Yeah.
If I'm honest, this one has been trademarked because I have very few personal heroes, but Gene Kim is one of them. The author of Phoenix Project and Project Unicorn. And right. In a conversation with him, where I explained what I thought human debt was, he actually suggested I trademark it, and anything right. Kim tells me to do, I'll do it.
So you actually brought me to my next question by talking about emotional banking. How is it for you? Like we met 5 years ago when you were speaking about emotional banking at the Data Natives Conference in Berlin. Fantastic conference. Thanks to Elena for organizing it and having you as a speaker and me as a participant. Uh, why emotional banking? Why the shift from banking to uh, psychological safety and people not tech? Like, yeah, just tell how you want to tell it, the story from then till now.
Oh gosh, we don't have the time from then.
Yes, we have. Yeah.
I'll compress it.
Maybe
I'll try.
maybe the highlights, because part of it is also like to understand like what were the challenges and opportunities that you faced as a woman in the banking and then in the information technology. Maybe just kind of like whatever comes to your head, and I'll be sure to keep you on time.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So, really long story, as short as I can. So I have a background in psychology and business, and out of there, I have worked in technology all along and found FinTech, or FinTech found me 12 years ago, maybe, at the beginning of FinTech, essentially, when all these banks had found the digital Jesus and they were going to flock. And I was really lucky at that time because I was headhunted by a company in Iceland, which did very well, became a scale up. I was employee 4. We ended up being a scale up in the next few years, won a few Finnovates. And that was the time when I fell in love with agile. I was very involved in making product and innovation. And yeah, that's how kind of I fell in love with making software products.
So you were a big fan of agile and using agile before it was
Oh,
actually popular.
absolutely. I'm one of the original Kanban boards in our office a good, 10 years ago. So, and you know, my understanding of agile is so fetish based, if you wish. I am so sold to it that the child and I have an agile board. There's no family project that happens that's not on a Trello. You name it. Like I run my life with boards. But more importantly, I think what agile teaches is, I think once you get it, I hope, it teaches you to stay flexible, and it makes you really resilient, and it lets you fall in love with learning again. It makes you focused on this very short feedback loop. It's addictive to run fast and do great things. So I can't believe that anyone who really got what agile is about would ever go back to, no, thank you. I got it, but I'd much rather just think sequentially and take it step by step. So I think it's an interesting, obviously longer conversation, but that's how I became what I call an agile anthropologist. So I can't even enthusiast. And so from there, or rather while building that, I became part of the FinTech community to a degree. I got really lucky because at the time that I fell into it, it was a small community that was very active, and people were putting their hearts and souls into this new way of doing consumer things. And you know, kind of we all grew together and learned together how to make products, and probably talked to a good 200-300 banks in this time. And around 2015 or 16, I just decided that I'd like to kind of go on my own and explore the concept of emotional banking that I had come up with. And while doing so, I've done a
what drove you to that? Because like I'm very much, you know, I'm a big fan of your emotional banking, and that like that's what's kind of lacking, that you know every decision we make financially is driven by emotion.
Absolutely.
So,
What drove that was just shock, because I was coming from a place where I thought a lot of, or almost everything should be based on some type of research on how people feel. This is their money we're talking about. Surely that aside from their relationships, their family, their love life, this has to be the most important topic. Surely these banks have these hidden laboratories where they figure out how people feel. And the more I got to know banks, the less of those laboratories I was finding. So I got all up in arms about this. It's ridiculous. We study the color of potatoes under the moonlight, but we don't figure out how people feel about their money. So
yeah, more of this kind of stuff is done with FMCG, like fast moving consumer goods, like your dish soap or your whatever, but not with banking products.
Yes, things that are a lot more trivial see a lot more inquiry than the feelings around your money. So I left the startup I was with to fix it because I was going to save banking. And and it took me a few months of speaking to CEOs and boards and so on, and telling them just that, like, are you serious? You need to start doing agile. You need to start doing human-led design. You can be lean like a startup. This is the only way you're going to find out how the consumer feels about their money, and you can deliver what you need to be doing. And a few months into it, I realized I can't do it. It's self-destroying.
I remember us having those conversations that like people realized, but the industry wasn't ready to embrace it like now, ironically. Like it seems that
Yeah,
it's you
but
were ahead of
it
your
was also,
time.
exactly. But it was also the idea of talking to people about it, even if they really connected with it. It was such a sterile exercise, and
Yeah.
it just left us both soul killed. So I was like, I can't be doing this. So I took everything that I was saying to them for 20K in a room, put it in a book to buy for 20 quid off the internet.
Yeah, what was the book called?
It's called Emotional Banking,
Right.
Fixing Culture and Changing Retail Banks into Brands. Long title from Palgrave Macmillan. Put it all in there, and we're like, look, just read this instead. I'm out. No less because as I was writing the book, it occurred to me that this thing I'm seeing, where everyone knows what the digital answer is and no one is able to put it together, is caused by this human debt concept and is
Okay.
not personal to banking. It's across the board in most other industries. And so here's my goal of fixing banking. And all of a sudden, I probably had the midlife crisis. You know what? Let's fix all organizations that have human debt, which like just small thing to do
So you
on
just
a weekend.
it was not good enough for you to have tried to challenge the financial services industry. You decided to go for all
It's
industry.
when you see it, you can't unsee it. I don't think that anyone who's noticed human debt around them in at an organizational level can leave it alone.
Nah.
All of
Anybody who's an empathic, feeling person, I know exactly what you're talking about. That's why I've been your fan and big fan of emotional banking and also psychological safety and PeopleNotTech, because it's the missing piece, it's the missing link that everybody knows that is missing, but nobody wants to bring into the equation, that everything is about KPIs and this, that, the other. And it's like, well, how I feel is also a KPI.
it should be, yes, it should be. I was actually surprised when I went down this path. It's only been 2 years in the bit, 2 very intense years for us. But
Very, yeah.
um, but we started. One thing I knew for a fact is I didn't want to build another consultancy, because the last thing the world needs is another boutique
I
consultancy.
remember having that discussion with you. You said, no, you want to build software. You want to build a
Software.
solution. I remember that.
I wanted to leave people with something in their hand, an artifact for change, because no matter how awesome you are, no matter how, if God himself had a consultancy and came down and were like, look, these are the things, people would still go like, oh my God, those are the things. And then everyone would go home and they'd forget that conversation happened. So
You've got to have,
um,
sorry, your next article or something. If God had a consultancy, dot, 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 you know?
no, they're gonna think
That's,
it's a
no, that
McKinsey
is, that
article
is,
again. I'm gonna
no,
get
that is
that.
perfect. Sorry, you just made, like, I love, you bring a sense of like true rationality to intensely complex topics. So go
Thank you.
ahead.
That's
Sorry.
very good. I appreciate that. I'll keep that as I'll put it in my gratitude tomorrow. It really counts. So, I just thought I can't be justifying doing another consultancy. I need to do something that will make change on its own. And I don't need to be sitting there having a moment with people in a room. Probably born out of the fact that I'm neurodiverse. So I'm not horribly built to be speaking to people either. So I completely get where developers come from and everyone else. Like if
I'm
there's
sorry, I don't mean
something,
to laugh. It's like inside joke. I mean, you are very, you like to speak, but yeah, I can see that. Yeah, no, no, yeah, no. I mean, in a good way. You like to speak, but sometimes it's like, then it's like, okay, go away. No, but not in a bad way. Like it's, you are. This is how you're wired, and so why not put that into something positive in terms of like creating software? Sorry, I didn't.
no, it's fine. I don't see it as a bad thing at all. I'm trying to tell my little one that it's not a bad thing. It's a superpower, and he thinks I'm exaggerating. But And so I wanted to make software, that I knew. Then I got really lucky. We got these amazing people who were very senior. They knew what they were doing. They were at that kind of career path of theirs where they really knew a lot of stuff and could tell wisdomously about another bit of stuff. So we put together a really cool team, and with that team, our first order of business was, what is one thing that would make the biggest dent in human debt? That was our to do. What is the thing that will make most change? And you were there for the ride. You know that we took a wrong turn first, and I'm very open about our journey of initially we had a failure, which is, or rather a wrong turn, not necessarily.
Yeah, you had a product.
Experiment.
Yeah.
So we started from the premise that we have to find a way to put together the perfect team, which is a common journey and misconception.
You learned the hard way, didn't you, my dear?
Yes, yes, indeed. So we've created an algorithm that was asking some questions, figuring out about soft skills and passions and where people's hearts were, and putting that together with whatever info the system already had. And then the AI would spit perfect teams for a certain topic or for a certain. And on top of it, people could vote for and give a vote of confidence to those teams and so on. So it was not a bad idea, but it was absolutely worthless in terms of making big change in an organization. And it took us a few months to realize that, no less because everyone got excited about, oh my God, this could be the future of how we put teams together. But because they get excited about an idea, it doesn't mean that that's ever going to become practice or
you're preaching to the choir. I can't tell you how many times I've been excited about something and then someone says, well, how are you going to do that? I said, I don't know, it's just a good idea.
So, I mean, if we had read more to begin with, I don't think we would have taken this path, because it is almost precisely what happened in the same premise as in Project Aristotle from Google. They too started with the idea of, let's put together what makes us a perfect team. Let's put together more of these. And in their study, what they found out was that it had nothing to do with the coordinates that they were expecting it to have something to do with.
Right.
And they did include the soft skills that we were measuring in it and so on, but they also included anything from diversity to compensation to ping pong tables, you name it.
Yeah.
And nothing was correlating except for the 5 coordinates they came up with, the number one of which is psychological safety, then structure and clarity, impact, purpose, and other bits that you need to have a healthy organization. And so when we found that, I had the revelation one day and went back to our developers and we're like, our beautiful product that we're making, we gotta scrap that. That's not useful. We gotta make something almost
Thanks, but yeah.
So the pivot was to that and to psychological safety. I was now convinced, and I was sure, and we all were, I think, at those times. I remember those conversations with a very strong advisory board you were part of, that were, yes, this is probably one thing that would make a serious dent in performance for teams. And that's when we started creating our dashboard for PeopleNotTech.
I'm looking at the other questions that I have, because we only have 11 minutes left. So thank you for that. I didn't want to interrupt, but I wanted to, because there's some other questions here that what challenges and opportunities have you faced as a female leader? And
I shy away from the
just share your opportunity. I know, but just
I'll see why. I'm happy to say why. Once a year on
I mean,
Women's Day,
this is International Women's Day, and I think it's important for people to understand.
I was very tempted to even answer that challenge thing, but I feared it would only cause controversy, because I have a very seemingly anti-feminist stance about it, which I think, to my mind, is not at all anti-feminist, but I can see why it's being seen that way. Meaning, I try not to participate in anything that's women only. That's a business rule I've had for the last 5 years or so. It started with a famous conversation with really big startup accelerator. I won't name, but you can imagine. And they asked me to put together an event for women in technology. And I just found it absurd. This was before there were that many and everywhere. I just found it ridiculous. I couldn't understand why there would be a room for just women. And they were serious. They wanted to know, should they have nail polish competitions and you name it. I mean, the ideas that I had about a women's meeting was shocking. And I offered as an example, like, are we going to have another room for dwarfs and another room for people who are pink? That's absolutely ridiculous. Like,
I think that you know what, it's interesting that you said that, because it's all about, like, if we're talking about inclusion and equality, then why are we creating another silo, you know?
Exactly. Why are we making this segregation? So it started then, and then I realized I am part of the problem by going to these things that are women only. As soon as there was anything that was just, I call them vajayjay monologues. I mean, if our goal is to get women in technology, we're not going to get them in technology in a separate room so someone ticks their quota.
Yeah.
So it has.
I know what you mean, and I'm always very like, when someone says, "Oh, so this is only for women," I'm like, yeah, but I'm a fan, you know. So like when I'm allowed into certain groups, like the future female lead on Facebook or something like that, I'm really always appreciative, because it shows that they're really thinking about diversity.
Yeah, that's what counts, is that we get everyone on the same path, that we level the playing field, we make it about merit, we make it about who kicks ass, and I guarantee that women kick ass a lot more often. But kind of the way we go about it, I think it's interesting. I think a lot of people have made an industry out of it, which is necessary in some places, but hurtful.
Well, I think that it's like, if I equate it to being gay, it's kind of like I feel more comfortable when I go to first time experience to a gay bar to be, you know, now I don't care. I'll ask any guy in any bar, whatever, if he is or isn't. So I think it's kind of the same thing. Like, you got to kind of work up to your own confidence level. So maybe these groups are good for, like, to build up the confidence. So, but since I've known you, you've had no problem with confidence. You are like.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I mean, it is tough. I'd be lying. It's tough in being in a male-dominated industry, both in technology and in finance, the two most famous ones.
How do you manage? How do you stay sane? How do you stop yourself from rolling your eyes from, like, comments that some people might make?
I'm not. I've owned it all along. It's never been a case of me trying to blend in and look like a boy or behave like a boy or any of those things. I've just been me all along. And one of the biggest compliments I've ever gotten from that perspective has been from someone who is now a senior in Google. And she was saying that we met many years ago, and she was saying that it was the first time that I saw a woman in a position of power who was having makeup and was wearing whatever she wanted and so on. And she said, oftentimes when I decide what to wear the next day, I'm like, what would Duena do? What would she wear? So that to me was like one of the biggest compliments ever.
That's awesome.
Attempting to make yourself into a mayor is absolutely not the way to go about this. No. So yeah, I told you not to get me started on.
No, it's good. It's good. I think. I mean, it's especially today. Like I said, I think that you're an inspiration for women in business anywhere. I think that it's you're unashamedly yourself, and that's, I think, is important, because you bring an element of, like, you are unique. We are all unique. We all have a place at the table. Yeah, and I think that's what's the most important thing, that you don't. It's not about woman, man, pink, midget, or whatever. Sorry, using the wrong words right now. But you're coming to the table as a human being, and you have something to add. Maybe the second last question. What was it like having interaction with Amy Edmondson and with all her stuff about, you know, she's Harvard business professor now, Novartis, and tell me about that experience meeting her and how.
She is absolutely amazing. As I said, I have very few heroes, but she is one of them.
Can I just jump in? She has 2 books called the Fearless Organization and
Teaming. Yes.
Both books
she
are
has
amazing.
A bunch more books, but those are the big important ones that everyone should read. So Amy Edmondson is godmother of the concept of psychological safety. She didn't exactly arrive at this herself, but she's the main body of research. We can only thank her for it existing. And so when I found the concept, I read everything there was to read about it, because thank you autism for making me go through a subject like it's never existed before. And yes, so she became a hero of mine really quickly. And then when we started creating the PeopleNotTech dashboard, for one of the first things I've done was to reach out to her and say, I'd really like some counsel. We're making a piece of software I've not seen. Well, one, have you seen anything like it? And two, are these the correct premises? Are we looking at the right things? Are we measuring the right behaviors? Is this what is inside the concept of psychological safety? Because the thing that I was observing at this stage, you have to remember, we didn't have anything, we were just building it. And what I was observing is that people immediately connected. Yes, it's that time when you feel like family with your team, you run fast, you have that magic, you trust each other, it feels amazing. Everyone got it. But then when you pop the hood and you're like, what does that actually mean? And the furthest you would go was, it means you're not afraid of each other, you're free to speak up, and you're open and authentic. But if you further pop that hood and said, well, okay, but what kind of magic does that? What potion do we need to be drinking so that happens? There was very little in the way of practical advice in any which way. I mean, there were some people saying you should have fearless conversations, you should be vulnerable. I mean, common sense things for leadership 2.0, but that didn't make psychological safety, it just made for better individuals, better leaders, and so on. So I spoke to her, and again, my thing was, are there any other bits of software like this? She hadn't seen any. In fact, she said, and she made my ear, she said, if I could have made software, I would have written this years ago. And that was the best moment.
That's exactly, I wanted, because you've said that before, and I think that's something that must be just some, I don't know the right word, just quantifies that which you're doing in a way that you could never expect, even regardless of the success that you will have in the future. It's just nice to hear from someone who's
just she's talking about our babies, of course. Yeah, I'm very invested, almost as invested in the real child. So it was amazing to hear that hits the nail on the head, because what she was saying is, I have all these conversations, I go to the boardrooms, I talk to the CEOs, I tell them what it is, they completely get it, and they go like, oh my God, psychological safety is important. What should we do about it?
Right.
And my answer is always, keep an eye on it, because realistically, there was no real, here's what you do about it, in terms of keeping an eye on it, measuring it, and improving it. So that was our goal, how to start measuring it in a continuous fashion, which is why it's a dashboard, and then kind of present that data with enough knowledge that teams can autonomously self-improve.
Cool. Last question then is related to that. Your upcoming book, what can people expect? What's it going to be?
About the book. I'm a horrible book promoter. Don't tell my publisher, but I'm not very good with that. It's called People Before Tech. It's coming out in May for Europe and the UK.
May 14th, right? Is it?
The 13th. May 13th. But it can be pre-ordered on Amazon, obviously, already. It's very cheap as well. No one consulted me about the price, but it's called
Don't buy it. This is reverse psychology.
It's called People Before Tech, the importance of psychological safety and teamwork in the digital age. And my goal with the book was, I saw this big gap between two communities that should really be the ones that are fixing this human debt of ours. One community is the HR community, the learning and development professionals, all the people that were already tasked with doing the people work. And then the other community is the agile/DevOps community. And that's where I feel the knowledge on what makes high performance in technology exists. And I think that if these two cannot find a way to meet in the middle, exchange information, and work together, then one of them is not going to be on the case anymore. And I don't think it's going to be the DevOps community, unfortunately. So I think it's really imperative that the HR community wakes up to how important this is, to how key to almost everything else in human, that it is to focus on teams, focus on their dynamic, get them high performing, get individuals to love what they do and feel like they can run fast together. And all that knowledge exists in practicality in the DevOps community. So the book bridges those two communities, or at least I hope so. It explains what each of these things are in the language of the other. And there's the foreword by Professor Dr. Emil Massa, and then there's an interview with Gene Kim on the other end. So it's the sandwich in between.
Nicely bookended.
Yeah, bookended.
If nothing else, buy the book to read the introduction and the end. So
right.
So I want to say thank you very much. This was probably the quickest turnaround in terms of an idea to fruition from Friday till today. Yep. Thank you to our two guests. This will be recorded and we're going to share it later. But thank you so much, Duena, and I wish you all.
Have any questions? We don't need to record them if you don't like, if you don't want to. But if anyone had any questions,
yeah, you can unmute yourself.
You can always just kind of connect on LinkedIn and so on and ask there if you have anything.
Yeah, Duena.
I don't have more questions. It was very interesting. Thank you very much for hosting this.
That's very kind.
Thanks, Bjorn. I'll reach out to you. Like, it's nice to catch up with you, and definitely, it's. I see. I will connect you guys on LinkedIn. I think that you guys could have some interesting discussions.
Okay, thanks a lot, then.
Thanks, and take care, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. Have a lovely day. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye bye.